So when we are in situations that are more emergent, as innovation is, so when we're thinking about building innovation practices, it's an emergent process. So when I say chart the direction, know directionally where you're trying to get. So to
Mhm.
use my example, I knew that I directionally was trying to get to what is the future of leadership, which is a really big question, but directionally I knew that that was where my sort of focus was, but I was not focused on a destination, meaning I didn't know if I was going to get a list of leadership competencies out of this,
Mm,
or if I was going to completely reinvent an idea that had been known for a very long time. I didn't know like the destination. So, when we're talking about innovation, especially in complex environments, as most of organizations are nowadays, we need to have directionally where we're going, but hold very loose to the outcome and the destination that we're seeking. Because if you are looking specifically for a destination, all you're going to do is be on repeat about best practices you've already
mm,
heard.
right.
And that's by definition not innovation. That's benchmarking.
Right. So just to clarify here, because I think this is probably where most people's minds would go. At least this is where my mind went. Is this is very different from thinking about you coming up with a strategy and how you're what are the benchmarks for demonstrating whether or not we're effectively executing on that strategic plan. This is kind of separate. This is more about, okay, yes, we know what our strategy is right now, but we also know that that strategy may very well be worthless 2 years from now if we can't continuously innovate and adapt to the changing environment that we're in. So we also have to have this approach to how are we going to adapt? How are we going to innovate? Is that
That's
true? Is
right.
that kind of what you're talking about here? So
Yes.
we're
And there's,
separating strategic execution
mm,
from the process of innovation. And in the process of innovation, it's much less about having this very clear destination, which can actually keep you from innovating, right? And it's much more about having a general direction and then being open to a lot of different possibilities. Is that what you're saying?
that is exactly what it is. And this is
Okay.
what I call emergent strategy. So there's two different
Mm,
types of strategy. Plan strategy, which we are all very familiar with. It comes out of Porter. It's reinforced through all the big consulting firms. So we're very familiar with plan strategy. And that has a place. So I'm very much a yes and when I
right.
think about organizations, because we have to be. They're too complex not to be. But the and I'm asking for here is to say, how do we also build and allow for emergence inside our strategy so that we can have more of a loosely held destination, and directionally we can make some pivots and moves so that we can really leapfrog, because that's where it comes from,
Mm,
is allowing a bit more openness and emergence to live inside the system. And I think we see that from some of the very classic examples, for instance, like Steve Jobs, when directionally he sort of knew that he wanted to think about fonts in very different ways. And the way he sort of allowed himself to do that, it also attaches to awe and wonder. And you may already know this story, but he audited, I think it was a typography class at a local college. And with just sort of a loosely idea that he was interested in this and sort of just being curious as he was.
mm-hmm.
So that's the on wonder part. And then he ended up bringing this into when he was building, the computer, and he got really interested around, okay, how do I use this information, this knowledge to create new fonts inside of the computer? So the reason why we have all these different font choices is directly because Steve Jobs was interested in this sort of random class. And then he brought it in and thought, okay,
Mm,
what is possible with this? And that's what I mean by direction. It's like, what is possible with this here? Now, he couldn't have possibly known that the destination was creating new fonts and a bunch of font options. He couldn't have planned for that. But he was holding all of these different ideas and then using them directionally to create something completely new.
Mm. Something that comes to mind too when you first started speaking about this was just how many times a startup launches with the idea of
That's
solving one
right.
problem, and then they start interacting with customers and find out there's a much more important problem. I mean,
Mm.
probably the most obvious example I think is Slack, where
Yes,
they were working on something entirely different, built an internal communication system for themselves, solve their own problem, and then when people saw it, they're like, we want that. and
that's
and I
right.
don't even know, I don't even remember what they originally started
I
working
think it
on.
was a gaming
Oh,
company.
is
I
that
think
what
it
it
was
was?
some sort of gaming. Yeah. Well, if I recall correctly. And I think what you're alluding to is really helpful because when you're in a big corporation, this can feel very novel and perhaps scary. Like,
Mm,
what? Don't set the strategic direction. And it just means be agile inside of that. And startups do it all the time. So I
mm,
think there is something to say, okay, let's look. What can we learn from how startups think about it? And to your point, there's always an interest in how is the customer receiving this. If we turn that inside, we could also say, when we want to build a new workplace, how are employees receiving this? We
mm,
are smack dab in the middle of a workplace revolution where we don't know the destination. We couldn't possibly know what hybrid's going to look like in 5 years. We'll probably look back and laugh at what we thought it was going to be,
mm.
but we're taking directional steps
Right.
because there's
I,
no other choice inside of it, right?
right. Yeah, we kind of have to right now,
We
unless you
have
just
to.
don't want to have any employees that stick around for more than 6 months.
That's
We need to
right.
be pretty flexible right now
That's
and
right.
agile.